Okay, we're back talking about ellipses again, and I want to talk about some, I guess, some more complete, some more details of the ellipse. We talked about the definition of an ellipse previously, and even showed how to make an ellipse. I'm going to slide down here, and I'm going to show you the standard equation of an ellipse. Okay, some things that I need to make sure that I point out. They're really important. They might not seem that important now, but they're going to be very important. So first thing, I've got both x and y squared. That's the first thing that I noticed. Parabolas, we had 1 squared, either x squared or y squared, never both. Circles, we had both of them squared, but they were equal to our radius over here. In an ellipse, it's always, standard form is always going to be equal to 1. It's going to make things a lot simpler for us. Okay, now, how does the rest of this work? Well, you can probably guess from what we've done in the past with circles and things like that, that h comma k is going to be our center. Okay, so that's the first thing that I know. Now, A and B, we're going to talk a little bit more about those later, but I guess the other thing that I almost forgot to mention is right here. It's a plus. In an ellipse, if it's plus between an x squared piece and a y squared piece, I know that it's an ellipse. If it's a minus, it's another conic section that we're going to talk about later. Plus ellipse minus dot. All right, so we've got that going for us now. Let's talk about some pieces of the ellipse before we come back and we talk about the A and the B. Okay, so here's my ellipse. First thing I want to do is I want to say F1 and F2 are what are called foci. So that means F1 is a focus, F2 is a focus. Together, they are plural foci. Now, this particular ellipse is wider than it is tall. So I'm going to draw a line across this. And from here to here, since it's the widest direction of our ellipse, this is what's called the major axis. So it actually is a line of symmetry for our ellipse. My drawing's not great, but the top half, bottom half, going to be symmetrical. The major axis. Now, something that I notice is that the foci are on the major axis. And also would have our center on that, but we'll show our center in here just a second. Now the other, if I've got a major axis, I probably have a minor axis. Stuff's jumping around on me. Minor axis. Now the minor axis, it's perpendicular to the major axis. It's, of course, shorter than the major axis. And it also goes through the center point. So the intersection of these two axes right here is our center point, and that's that h comma k that we talked about. Okay, so that's how all of that fits in. I've got a major axis, minor axis. I've got two foci. Okay, so how does all of this fit in with our standard form of our equation? Well, I'm going to put that back up here. X minus h quantity squared over a squared plus y minus k quantity squared over b squared equals 1. All right, so we know that h comma k, that's our center. Now, A and B, some people would define those different ways. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say A, since it's below my x and x is horizontal, it's going to be the distance from the center to a point on the horizontal axis. Now B, since it's below the y, and y has to deal with up and down, it's going to be the distance from the center point of my ellipse to a point on the vertical axis. And we'll talk about how to find our foci here in just a little bit, but first let's deal with this part. All right, so let's throw out an equation here. X minus 3 squared over 4 plus y minus 2 squared over, let's go with 9, equals 1. So I'm going to look right here and I'm going to say, well, a squared equals 4, so a is 2. Make myself a note while we're here. B squared is 9, so b is 3. My center, h comma k, is 3 comma 2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start plotting those, see where they come out in my graph. Okay, so 2, 2, we're going to shortcut this here so that we can save a little time. Okay, so my center point, 3 comma 2. Now that's not a point on my ellipse, so I'm just going to put a little x there. A, let's start with A. A was my horizontal, so that told me that I'm going to go from my center, I'm going to go to the right 2 spots, I'm going to go to the left 2 spots. Those are points on my ellipse. I don't know if that's major axis or minor axis, but we'll decide that in a little bit. B tells me to go up 3. 1, 2, 3 from my center. 1, 2, 3 from my center. Now I can tell that I went further up and down, so that means I have a vertical major axis because my value under my y component was bigger. Okay, so I've got my endpoints there, endpoints of my major and minor axis. I'm going to connect those in. Again, not much of an artist, but we've got our ellipse. Now, my last thing that I would need to do is I would need to find the foci. Well, we know that the foci have to be on the major axis. So that means they're going to be somewhere in here and somewhere in here. Okay, sorry about the pause there. I got interrupted by my little girl here. She's trying to help me out. So here we go. Well, I need to find these foci. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use C. And C is going to be my distance from my center point to my focus. And the way I find my C is C squared is going to be equal to whichever is bigger. In this case, B squared was bigger than A squared. So B squared minus A squared. So in our ellipse, we had that B was 3, so 3 squared, minus A was 2, so 2 squared. So C squared is equal to 9 minus 4. C squared equals 5, or C equals the square root of 5. So that means that our two foci are the square root of 5, or about, let's see, square root of 5 is a little less than 2.5. So I'm going to estimate that on here, and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to go up 2, and let's get a different color so it stands out. A little less than 2.5, there's one focus. A little less than 2.5, there's my second focus. Now how do I find those points? Well, I go to my center point, which was 3 comma 2, and I take my y component, 3 comma 2, y component, and I add square root of 5 to get my top focus, 3 comma 2 plus square root of 5. If I wanted a decimal approximation, I could use a calculator to do that. And I take my y component and I go down square root of 5. 3 comma 2 minus square root of 5 would give me my two foci.